Equals the woman in the cornfield. The notification pinged on my phone at 3:47 a.m., just like it had every night for the past week. Motion detected. Front door camera. I used to ignore these alerts, usually just a raccoon or the neighbor's cat, but not anymore. Not since Detective Morrison made it clear that I was still their prime suspect. Not since the town decided I was a murderer walking free on a technicality. I fumbled for my phone in the darkness, squinting as the screen blazed to life. The Ring app loaded slowly, my rural internet connection crawling along at its usual glacial pace. When the image finally materialized, my blood turned to ice water in my veins. There she was. Sarah stood at the edge of the cornfield across from our house, my house now, I suppose, perfectly still in the grainy black and white footage. Even through the camera's poor night vision, I could make out her familiar silhouette. The way she held her shoulders, slightly hunched forward when she was thinking. The cascade of long hair that she always tucked behind her left ear. The sundress I'd bought her last summer, the one with tiny flowers that she said made her feel pretty. My hands shook as I rewound the footage. There, she appeared at 3 hours 47 minutes and 12 seconds, stepping out from between the corn stalks like she was emerging from another world. She didn't move after that, just stood there staring at the house. At me. The timestamp showed she'd been there for exactly 3 minutes before the recording ended, but she never moved, never shifted her weight, never even seemed to breathe. I stumbled to the window, pressing my face against the cold glass. The street was empty except for the pale glow of the streetlight illuminating nothing but asphalt and the edge of Miller's cornfield. The corn stood 8 feet tall now, thick and rustling in the October wind. In 6 months, it had grown from bare earth to this towering maze that seemed to swallow the horizon. Sarah had always hated that cornfield. "It gives me the creeps," she'd said one evening as we sat on the porch swing. "All those stalks just watching the house. And the way the wind sounds through them at night, like whispers." I'd laughed at her then, called her imagination overactive. Now, staring into that wall of vegetation, I understood what she meant. The corn did seem to watch, and in the pre-dawn darkness, those rustling sounds carried an almost conversational quality. I saved the video to my phone and tried to go back to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing there. When morning came, I called in sick to work, not that anyone would miss me at the hardware store. Most customers actively avoided my register now anyway. Instead, I spent the day reviewing every piece of footage from the past week. There she was, night after night. Always the same time, always the same spot, always that 3-minute duration before the recording cut off. How had I missed this pattern? How had the police missed it? But I knew the answer to that question. The police had stopped monitoring my security system weeks ago. Detective Morrison had made it clear they were convinced of my guilt, they just couldn't prove it. "We know what you did to her, David," he'd said during my last interview. "Maybe it was an accident. Maybe you two had a fight and things got out of hand. But she didn't just vanish into thin air. Except maybe she had." I drove into town that afternoon to buy groceries, mainly to prove to myself that I could still function normally. The whispers followed me down every aisle of Patterson's Market. Conversation stopped when I passed. Mrs. Chen, who used to chat with Sarah and me about her garden, suddenly found the soup cans fascinating when I walked by. At the checkout, teenage Melissa Patterson rang up my items without making eye contact. Her mother, Janet, watched from the customer service counter with undisguised hostility. "Heard you've been having some technical difficulties with your security system," Janet said as I waited for my card to process. "Tom Mueller mentioned his brother-in-law does IT work. Might want to give him a call." I looked up sharply. Tom Mueller was Detective Morrison's fishing buddy. They'd grown up together, went to the same church. If Tom was talking about my security system, it meant Morrison was still watching me, still hoping I'd slip up. "System's working fine," I said, signing the receipt with a hand that I hoped appeared steadier than it felt. "That's good," Janet replied with a smile that never reached her eyes. Wouldn't want any false alarms. Or false hope. The words followed me home like a curse. That night, I positioned myself by the living room window at 3:45 a.m., phone in hand, ready to catch Sarah in the act. I'd call out to her this time, I decided. I'd run outside and demand answers. 6 months of hell, 6 months of accusations and sleepless nights, and that goddamn detective treating me like a criminal. If Sarah was alive, if she was playing some sick game, it ended tonight. 3:47 came and went. The street remained empty. I checked my phone obsessively, refreshing the Ring app every few seconds. No motion detected. No notification. Nothing. But she'd been there every night for a week. Same time, same place, same duration. Why not tonight? Why not when I was watching? I stayed by the window until dawn, but Sarah never appeared. The cornfield swayed innocently in the breeze, and for a moment, I wondered if I was losing my mind. Maybe the stress had finally broken something in my brain. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there, creating elaborate fantasies to cope with the guilt. Because there was guilt, wasn't there? Not the kind Detective Morrison imagined, but guilt nonetheless. The fight we'd had that last night. The things I'd said. The way she'd looked at me when she walked out the door. I need some time to think, she'd said, her voice quiet and tired. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll figure this out. But tomorrow came and went, and Sarah never returned. Her car was found abandoned at Miller's Pond, keys still in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat. No signs of struggle, no blood, no body. Just Sarah's life interrupted mid-sentence, like she'd simply decided to stop existing. The next few days passed without incident. No Sarah at 3:47 a.m., no motion alerts, no ghostly figures emerging from the corn. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it all, that grief and isolation had conjured her from pixels and shadows. Then I ran into Dr. Elizabeth Harper at the post office. Dr. Harper had been Sarah's therapist, though I wasn't supposed to know that. Sarah had been secretive about her appointments, claiming she was seeing a general practitioner about headaches. I'd only learned the truth after she disappeared, when Detective Morrison let it slip during one of his interrogations. "David," Dr. Harper said, her voice carefully neutral. "How are you holding up?" "Fine," I lied, fumbling with my mail. Bills and junk, the mundane debris of a life falling apart. She studied me with those sharp psychologist eyes, the kind that seemed to catalog every twitch and micro-expression. "I know this has been difficult. Losing someone without closure, without answers, it can play tricks on the mind." "What kind of tricks?" "Grief manifests in many ways. Sometimes people see things, hear things. The mind's way of processing loss, of trying to make sense of the inexplicable." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "If you ever need to talk to someone who knew Sarah, I'm here." That night, I dreamed of corn. Endless rows stretching to the horizon, and somewhere in that green maze, Sarah was calling my name. I woke at 3:46 a.m., 1 minute before my phone would ping with its nightly alert. Except this time, the notification never came. I checked the app anyway, and my heart nearly stopped. The motion had been detected at 3:47, just like always, but there was no recording. The video file was corrupted, showing only static and digital artifacts. But in the thumbnail preview, I could just make out a pale figure at the edge of the corn. Technical difficulties, Janet Patterson had said. False alarms. False hope. I threw on clothes and ran outside, not caring that I was barefoot, not caring about the cold October air that cut through my thin t-shirt. The street was empty, but something felt different. The corn seemed taller somehow, more dense, pressing closer to the road than it had been the day before. "Sarah!" I called out, my voice swallowed by the rustling stalks. "Sarah, I know you're there." The corn whispered back, but not in any language I understood. I approached the spot where she'd been standing in the videos. The ground was soft from recent rain, and in the pale streetlight, I could just make out depressions in the mud. Footprints, maybe, though they were too indistinct to be certain. They led from the road into the cornfield, disappearing between the stalks. I followed them. The corn closed around me like living walls, blocking out the streetlight, blocking out the world. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, though I couldn't tell if they were coming from the wind or from deeper in the maze. My bare feet squelched in the muddy earth between the rows, and more than once I thought I heard footsteps matching my own pace. "Sarah?" I called again, but softer now. The darkness felt too complete for shouting. That's when I saw her. 20 feet ahead, standing between two corn stalks, facing away from me. The same sundress, the same long hair, the same posture I'd memorized from 6 months of loving her. She was perfectly still, just like in the videos, like she was waiting for something. I moved closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Sarah, please. Talk to me. Everyone thinks She turned around. The face wasn't right. It was Sarah's face, but wrong somehow, like a photograph that had been left in the sun too long. Her features were bleached and blurred at the edges, and her eyes were the color of corn silk, pale and empty and vast. "You let me go," she said, and her voice was the sound of wind through grain. "You let me walk away." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry about the fight, about everything I said. I never meant, you let me walk into the dark." She was closer now, though I hadn't seen her move. The corn pressed in around us, and I realized I couldn't remember which direction I'd come from. The stalks all looked the same, towering and rustling and alive with whispers. "I didn't know," I said. "I didn't know what would happen to you. But you hoped." The words hit me like a physical blow because they were true. During the worst moments of our fight, during those few terrible minutes when years of small resentments had boiled over into something toxic and cruel, I had wished she would just disappear. Just for a moment, just in the white heat of anger, I had wanted her gone. And then she was. "That's not," I started, but Sarah was already fading, becoming translucent like morning mist. The corn began to retreat, the stalks stepping backward in perfect synchronization until I found myself standing alone on the empty road. I stumbled back to the house, locked the door, and sat in the living room until sunrise. When I finally worked up the courage to check the Ring app, the corrupted video from the night before had vanished entirely. No record of motion, no timestamp, no proof that any of it had happened. But I knew what I'd seen. What I'd heard. The next morning brought Detective Morrison to my door, accompanied by a technician I didn't recognize. "Morning, David," Morrison said with his usual barely concealed hostility. "Mind if we take a look at your security system? We've had reports of some suspicious activity in the neighborhood." I let them in because refusing would only make things worse. The technician spent an hour examining my cameras and router while Morrison watched me like a hawk studying a rabbit. "Interesting setup you have here," the technician said finally. "Looks like someone's been accessing your system remotely. Probably just a glitch in the software, but I'd recommend changing your passwords, maybe upgrading your firmware." "Remote access?" Morrison perked up. "You mean someone could be manipulating the recordings?" "Theoretically, yes. Though it would take some pretty sophisticated knowledge to do it without leaving traces." The technician packed up his equipment. "I've installed some security patches that should prevent any future intrusions." After they left, I sat in the empty house and considered my options. Either I was being haunted by my dead fiancé, or someone was playing an elaborate psychological game designed to drive me insane. Both possibilities were equally terrifying. That night, I didn't wait for 3:47 a.m. I positioned myself by the window at midnight and watched the cornfield for any sign of movement. The hours crawled by, each minute stretching like taffy, until my eyes burned and my neck ached from the awkward angle. 3:47 came and went without incident. No motion alert, no Sarah, no whispers from the corn. The technician's patches seemed to have worked. But at 4:15 a.m., I saw something that made my blood freeze. Not Sarah this time. Detective Morrison, standing in the exact same spot where she had appeared, staring at my house with the same unnatural stillness. He was dressed in street clothes instead of his usual uniform, and in the pale streetlight, his face looked hollow and strange. I grabbed my phone to record him, but the camera app crashed every time I tried to open it. When I looked back out the window, Morrison was gone. The next morning, I drove to the police station with my phone, ready to confront him about the midnight surveillance. But the desk sergeant told me Morrison was on vacation in Florida, had been for the past week. Even showed me the duty roster to prove it. "You feeling all right, son?" the sergeant asked with genuine concern. "You look like you haven't slept in days." I had no answer for that, so I left. The pattern continued for weeks. Different figures appearing at 3:47 a.m. in the exact spot where Sarah had stood. Dr. Harper, staring at the house with empty corn silk eyes. Janet Patterson, motionless as a scarecrow. Tom Mueller, his face bleached and wrong. All the people who thought I was guilty, all the people who believed I was a killer walking free. My phone captured none of it. The security system remained stubbornly functional and frustratingly normal. But I knew what I was seeing, even if I couldn't prove it to anyone else. The corn grew taller as October deepened toward November. Soon it would be harvest time, and Miller would cut it all down, leaving nothing but stubble and empty earth. I found myself dreading that day, though I couldn't explain why. The corn felt protective somehow, like a green curtain hiding secrets that were better left concealed. Last night was different. Sarah appeared again for the first time in weeks, but not at 3:47 a.m. She came at sunset, stepping out from the corn while the sky burned orange and red behind her. She walked across the street slowly, deliberately, until she stood directly in front of my house. I met her at the door. "You know the truth now," she said, and her voice was almost normal, almost human. "About what you really wanted that night." "I never wanted you dead," I whispered. "No," she agreed. "You wanted me gone. You wanted me to disappear, to stop being your problem, your responsibility, your guilt." Her pale eyes fixed on mine. "And I did. I walked away just like you wished, walked right into the dark between the corn rows, and I kept walking until there was nothing left but want and whisper and wind. I can't undo it," I said. "I can't take back what I thought, what I felt. I know." She reached out as if to touch my face, but her hand was cold mist and moonlight. "But others can take your place. Others who wish, who want, who let people walk away into the dark." Behind her, figures emerged from the corn. Detective Morrison with his hollow face. Dr. Harper with her measuring eyes. Janet Patterson, Tom Mueller, a dozen others I recognized from town. They all stood motionless in my yard, watching with expressions of terrible understanding. "Every night at 3:47, Sarah said, someone in this town wishes someone else would just disappear. Every night, someone lets go of love and holds on to anger instead. Every night, someone walks away into the dark between the corn rows." The figures began to move toward the house, slow and inexorable as a tide. "The corn will be harvested soon," Sarah continued. "And then we'll need a new place to wait, a new place to watch from. Your house sits right at the edge of what used to be field. It remembers what grew here before the road was built, before the neighborhood was planned." I understood then why the corn seemed to press closer each night, why the whispers grew louder, why the pale figures appeared in that exact spot. It had always been a threshold, that place where Sarah stood. A border between the world of the living and the realm of wishes made real, of love abandoned, of guilt taking root and growing tall. The figures reached my porch. Detective Morrison raised his hand to knock, but the sound was like corn husks rubbing together in the wind. "You don't have to let us in," Sarah said softly. "You can call out, wake the neighbors, run away. But we'll be here when you come back. We'll be here every night at 3:47, growing stronger, growing more real, until the boundary breaks down completely. What do you want? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sarah smiled, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the woman I'd loved and lost and let walk away into the dark. We want you to join us, she said. We want you to come home. The corn whispers your name when the wind is right. Can you hear it? I'm writing this as the sun sets, as the shadows grow long across Miller's field. In a few hours, it will be 3:47 a.m. again, and they'll be waiting. All of them, standing at the threshold, patient as growing grain. I've been thinking about Sarah's last words to me that night 6 months ago, the ones I never told the police. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll figure this out. She kept her promise, didn't she? Tomorrow, Miller starts harvesting the corn. Tomorrow, they'll need a new place to wait and watch. My house remembers what used to grow here, remembers the deep roots and whispered secrets that never truly died. I can see them now, gathering at the edge of the field as darkness falls. Sarah stands at the center, no longer pale and strange, but solid and real and smiling. She raises her hand to wave, and I find myself waving back. The boundary is breaking down. And I think I'm ready to come home.